Okay, we are back live here, coast to coast and border to border on iHeart Radio. And we have got the amazing Roger Homefield. Joe Citizen himself is with us. It is Roger Homefield. He's with us today here on our big program. So Roger, you have been covering this whole thing with the Muslims, but the thing that what do you make of all this over the years? The fact that they just kind of have seeped in everywhere.
Well, they had a lot of help. There's been a lot of infiltration, but there's also been a lot of betrayal from our bureaucrats, our politicians, and literally we've been under attack by billions of dollars from the Islamists, creating a situation where if you don't give them special treatment, then you're an Islamophobe. So they just kept expanding and expanding and expanding. In 2004 is when I first became Joe Citizen, because I went to my neighborhood mosque after Nick Berg had his head cut off, and I decided that I've had it. I'm going to find out for myself, because Geraldo Rivera, that son of a bitch, he never asked any of these questions. Did anybody after 9/11, George Bush, who I liked at the time, but I have to retract all that because of what he did after. I mean, when he threw that perfect strike at Yankee Stadium, that was a fantastic thing. He did some great things after 9/11. But then when he went on TV holding hands with the imams, telling us there's nothing to worry here, these are loyal Americans, and at the time we all thought, well, look, he's trying to avoid backlash. He doesn't want people running and attacking mosques and everything. Okay, that's all well and dandy, and nor should we have. But basically, everybody went to sleep after that, and it was a stone cold lie. They were not loyal to America then, and they're not loyal to America now. And when I went on Muslim radio in 2004, I went on as a peacemaker, a bridge builder, a peacenik. And I, in fact, even became personal friends with Maulana Safayette Muhammad, who's a big-time imam down here at the Pembroke Pines Mosque. That's the mosque where the underwear bomber participated in. And I really actually grew to like the guy. And I explained it in my last show, the Islam Inconvenient Truths Part 2 on joecitizenshow.com, joecitizenshow.com. It's all there. Plus the interviews, the Muslim radio that I knocked on the door of the mosque, and he brought me in, and he gave me the general taqiyya that you hear, that always we're all from the same God of Abraham, blah, 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 blah. Look, I'm not a theologian, but that stuff is nonsense. But he was a very nice guy.
That stuff is nonsense.
Well, it is as far as the religious end, but I'm not going to get into that. That's not my wheelhouse. But he was very nice, and taqiyya is the art form of being very nice and not speaking like I am now, confrontationally, but being very calm and nice and slow and smiley and warm. And he said, well, he's not a bad guy. He doesn't seem like a bad guy. So he invited me on the Muslim radio show. And then I proceeded to ask these very difficult questions that Geraldo Rivera never asked. Now, had Geraldo Rivera asked this instead of looking for Jimmy Hoffa's body, we might have saved this country 22 years of bullshit for the last 22 years. I mean, I basically wanted to ask them questions like, do you condemn 9/11? And I had a list of these questions like, when synagogues and churches were taught to like everybody and be nice to the Muslims and all this, are you taught the same things about us and this? But just very direct questions about this and that. And I told them, I said, look, if you came here, and this is 2004. In other words, it took me 3 years, ladies and gentlemen, where I started to go crazy with every newspaper article was painting the Muslims as the victim. Every single article I saw, and I started scratching my head, and I said, something stinks here. Something is just not right. So I wanted to find out for myself. So I went on the radio show. He invited me on their Muslim radio show, and that's on joecitizenshow.com too. It's called Time Capsule 2004. Extremely interesting. You really want to hear them for yourselves. But I said to them on the show, if you came here to join us to be part of America and be part of the American dream, we welcome you with open arms. And if you would help us find the terrorists, you'll be American heroes. I mean, I was actually trying to show them a way, a path to being accepted by Americans as a part of society, because this was back in 2004. So I was still pretty naive back then myself. So I kind of looked at them and with some pity as well, thinking that they were just stepping all over their you-know-whats and didn't know how to help themselves. And I figured, look, you have to show that you're separating yourselves from the terrorists, because I worried about the, quote, peaceful Muslims also, right? And I assumed that most of them were peaceful. So I was going there with the attitude of trying to help them, not attack them, not as a hater, not as a racist, not as a bigot, not as an Islamophobe, not as a xenophobe, none of this bullshit that the left accuses everyone of at all times. I was actually there to hold their hands and help them and guide them and show them the way. And if you listen to it's 2 hours boiled down to 22 minutes. I didn't eliminate anything of what it's just the advertisements, and I took out the callers in, which was actually quite interesting too. But I brought it down to 22 minutes, and it's just, and I told him at the same time, but if you came here with the predisposition of hating our citizens, Christians and Jews, well, then that's not immigration, that's invasion.
Yep.
And I know you've heard that long since, but I was saying it back in 2004, and I said it directly to their faces, very nicely. I couldn't have been nicer. I couldn't have been more humble in the way I spoke to them, and respectful. And I gave them, Alana, every benefit of the doubt when we talked about the terrorism and this and that. And I said, oh, of course, but not you. And it really breaks my heart, because I really grew to like this gentleman, Maulana Safiyat Muhammad. But it's like Dave Gobbets, it's like Al Rasuli points out, when it comes to Sharia law, you cannot pick and choose and parse what parts you want and what parts you don't want. You're either beholden to Sharia law or you're not. So I like the guy so much that, look, I got taken in too. And even to this day, it breaks my heart to think, I can't imagine that this guy is really for the heinous terrorism that's gone on. But hey, it's got to be one or the other. Look, Jiggy, I don't know if I told you this part. I actually interviewed Safiyat Muhammad after that, quite a time after that, for 6 hours. It was at least 6 hours. Yes, 2 3-hour sessions. You know about what? On how to, if they could clarify the violent strains in the Islamic doctrines for 21st century consumption. Why clarify? Because I was trying to work around the fact that they can't reform. All the great religions have had reformation, but Islam can't have reformation, because that would be heresy and you get your frickin' head cut off. And if he suggested, yes, let's reform the religion, he would be an apostate, which could be punishable by death. So I was trying to say, well, what about if we have a re-clarification for 21st century consumption? So folks, if you don't, 6 hours, I did that. If you don't call that bending over backwards, and that's what it was. I was bending over backwards to find a way to bridge a way of peace between them and us, and to bring them into American society, and to get them to separate themselves from terrorists. So 22 years later, when I get nitwits, idiots, calling me an Islamophobe, you know, I'm beyond being told, well, I shouldn't raise my voice. Give me a frickin' break. You know, I'm not getting paid millions of dollars for this. I'm not getting paid crap. In fact, it's ruined my life. It's ruined my life to the extent that, you know, I was just involved with music and baseball, and really that was it. I didn't need this dark science fiction, grotesque horror show to delve into, because that's what this is. This is a dark horror show. Remember the dozen or so Christians dressed in orange, lined up on their knees, about to have their heads cut off? They didn't just cut them off, they sawed them off. This is really, this is a reality that is beyond really what I can handle. As far as somebody that has sensibilities, and as far as somebody that has deep, sensitive feelings for all other life. This is so over the top for me, and this is the scum of a life that I've had to partake in for the last 22 freaking years, and trying to warn America while everybody sits back and yawns and laughs at you. Who the hell needs that? So we better wake the hell up. If people don't see what's going on now, I don't know what it's going to take. You know, you just had the 18-year-old kid in Britain. He was stabbed by a migrant, and the cops handcuffed him. He says, "I can't breathe," and they didn't believe him because the migrant said, "Oh, he was racist." And of course, if you're white and you're accused of being a racist, well, of course it's true. If you're white, you're a racist. I mean, that's the mentality. So the kid died. He bled out. And then it became known after the fact that, oh, he was telling the truth. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry about that. We just assumed,
Sorry about that.
We just assumed he was a racist because the migrant said he was. The migrant accused him of calling him of being racist. They're starting to wake up in England. I don't know how they're going to have time to straighten themselves out. They've got Nigel Farage, thank God. But really, I don't know how they're going to save that country without an absolute Gettysburg-type bloodbath right in London. I don't know how they're going to do it because there are so many. And folks, you see, but nobody knows what's going on. None of this is on the American news. They've been dealing with Muslim patrols, where the patrols go around beating up Londoners. Okay. And this is not just anecdotal, ladies and gentlemen. And this has been going on for years. And so when you say, what do I think of this and how did this happen over 22 years, we have to drop back and look at the bigger picture and say, well, actually, yes, how did this happen to where the news media to this day is creating a blackout? And then you go back to this new world order where, whoever can take down our society, they'll have the red-green alliance between the communists and the Islamists who aren't friends, but they're friends in the sense that America is in their way. If we're going to take down this old society and create a new one, then they'll battle it out amongst themselves after they've destroyed us, I suppose. But a lot has happened to be able to get them to this point. Yes, we've been infiltrated. But folks, we were telling everybody we were going to be infiltrated. Why? Because we found their playbook, the Grand Jihad. It was revealed in the Holy Land Foundation trial called the Grand Jihad, explaining just what they're going to do. They're going to get people to like them. They're going to build a lot of mosques. They're going to get involved with the social events and goings on in the communities. And they were going to add more and more people. And then they were going to get political power. And they would get more power. And once they would start to get more power, then they would start to show their muscle. Now, have you noticed that the Muslims have had no problem in showing up on the streets in New York City to beat up Jewish kids in broad daylight and then lay all over the street praying because they're so religious, intimidating the local residents by doing so and demonstrating their superiority, because that's what they're doing when they're doing that, okay? And they haven't seen any pushback from the Americans. Frankly, they see us as a bunch of yellow-bellied pussies because that's exactly how we have behaved. Now, we've always been taught to believe, look, we're not vigilantes. No, we're not. But when you have Mandami, who is jihad boy in New York City, well, he is. I mean, he's a flat jihadist. He can sue me if he wants. He's a freaking cultural jihadist of the highest order. Okay? A jihadist, the purpose of jihad is to spread Sharia law. Now, you can spread it violently, and you get your 21 virgins that way if you get killed. But you can also become a jihadist non-violently and be a cultural jihadist, like he is, like Ilhan Omar, like Keith Ellison, that son of a B. He was the first Muslim ever elected. He's the attorney general now of Minnesota. And back in 2010, when Peter King, I'm not saying he did it because I did it, but the Joe Citizen Show, we wrote up a document demanding a full-blown, open, public congressional hearing on jihad in America, radical Islam in America, and Pete King actually did so. Well, what happened? Keith Ellison shows up, starts crying alligator tears, And him and the entire stinking Democrat Party turned the whole thing into a mockery, blaming racism and all this crap. Now, if Keith Ellison gave a damn about this country, he would have said, well, let's discuss this. Let's see if there's a problem with the growing spreading of radical. There's no such thing as radical Islam, by the way, folks. It's just Islam. It's either Sharia compliant Islam, which is Islam, or it's not. And if it's not, then it's not even Islam. It's something other. But that's caused so much confusion over the years. Because if you reject Sharia law, like I say, that would make you an apostate, punishable by death. So none of the Muslims, even the peaceful ones, want to stand up and say, oh, well, I reject this and that, because that would mean that they're rejecting Islam and they're no longer really Muslims, they're apostates, punishable by death. So Keith Ellison, that's our wonderful Attorney General in Minnesota. And you asked me a broad question like that. How does this make me feel, or what do I think of this? And now you tell me that they're turning changing stations in a store in Minnesota into Muslim prayer rooms. Look, folks, it's very simple. No special treatment. When Elena Kagan, that beauty, was president of before she was Supreme Court Justice. Puke. When she was the president of Harvard, she took tens and tens of millions of dollars from the Islamists. And the first thing she did, now this may not sound harmful. You say, what's wrong with that? She gave the Muslims their own hours for pool, to use the pool. Nobody else, just the Muslims. And you may say, well, what's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that was special treatment. And once the camel puts his toe under the tent, it just went from there, and it's run rampant for the last, really ever since 9/11, ever since everybody's been walking on rice paper because they don't want to be called an Islamophobe. And we're screwed if we don't pull our heads out of our butts, but fast. And Sharia law has got to be outlawed, and the mosques that promote Sharia law have to be shut down. And we really need a terrorism czar. Now, I've been told, somebody said, well, we actually have one with Gorka. I like Gorka, but what's going on? Well, what's holding up the delay, as we used to say in the music business? Okay, what is holding up the delay? The Muslim Brotherhood is a self-avowed enemy of the United States since 1928. So what is holding up the delay in declaring them a terrorist organization and shutting them down? And that way, frankly, if they're considered a terrorist organization, well, then anybody with links to them, including Mondami, should have their butts arrested or deported.
Well,
but we're not doing anything.
You are fired up today. We have got Roger Homefield with us today. Roger, as we wrap up here, you have anything before we...
Well, my stuff is on joecitizenshow.com. My defunct music career is rogerhomefield.net. For those of you that think I'm a hater, you can see my romantic ballads on rogerhomefield.net. But all this terror, I hate it. It's a horror show. But anyway, joecitizenshow.com.
Good stuff. Roger, I will talk to you next week, my friend.
Okay, Jiggy.